I'm Robin Amlôt of IBS Intelligence. You're listening to the IBS iViews podcast. Our topic today, a living anti-fraud system, and I'm joined by Varghese, Chief Executive Officer of Clarify, a Pervios company. Rivi, here's what keeps banking CEOs awake. Fraud. Fraud is no longer a static problem with static solutions. It's fluid, morphing, evolving daily. AI has given fraudsters superpowers. We're seeing attack patterns evolve in hours, not months. Traditional defenses feel like fighting smoke with a hammer. What have we got to change? What fundamentally different approach do banks need?
Robin, you have nailed the core paradox. Banks are trying to solve a living problem with dead tools. Static rules, fixed thresholds, periodic updates. They are artifacts from when fraud was predictable. Today's fraud doesn't just break rules, it learns from them and then mutates. The answer isn't better rules or faster updates. It's accepting a fundamental truth. To fight a living threat, you need a living defense. That's why we have pioneered what we call a living anti-fraud operating system.
That phrase, operating system, that's an interesting metaphor, because if we think about it, banks have been treating fraud prevention as an application layer problem, when it's actually an infrastructure challenge. So you're suggesting that fraud defense needs to be as fundamental as the core banking system itself.
Exactly. Every bank has an OS to operating system to run the bank, but they're defending it with standalone tools. That's like running Windows 11, but protecting it with antivirus from 1995. What makes our system living are three characteristics. First, it breathes, continuously ingesting data, learning patterns, adapting defenses in real time. Second, it thinks using our 4 elements framework. Earth for identity, water for transactions, air for channels, fire for threats. Third, it evolves. Every attack makes it stronger.
Okay, so this framework, the 4 elements, is intriguing. It mirrors how sophisticated fraudsters think. At least that's what I would say. They probe identity systems, they study transaction patterns, they exploit channel vulnerabilities, they share attack vectors. You're essentially building a defense that mirrors the offense's sophistication. But here's the challenge. In a world of zero-day exploits and AI-generated attacks, how does even a living system keep pace?
That's the key insight. We don't try to keep pace, we change the game. Traditional systems try to predict fraud's next move. Instead, we build a system that adapts faster than fraud can evolve. When one bank spots new pattern, all banks are protected instantly. It's a collective immunity. The philosophical shift is crucial, which means, stop playing defense, start building an immune system that gets stronger with every attack.
Okay, so the living system concept is compelling, but let's address the execution challenge. The dirty little secret about bank transformations, certainly as far as McKinsey is concerned, is that 70% of them fail. And one could argue that the percentage is even higher for real-time AI-driven systems. Banks have layers of legacy, regulatory constraints, cultural inertia. What's different about implementing this that breaks that failure pattern?
The 70% failure rate, they fail because banks implement tomorrow's solutions with yesterday's methods. You can't deploy life, you cultivate it. That's a fundamental shift. We start with embryonic intelligence, simple but learning from day one. Banks see patterns within weeks. It's evolution, not revolution. The living operating system wraps around existing systems, learning from them while gradually taking over decisions.
Okay, that's clever. So you're actually using the legacy systems as training data rather than seeing them as obstacles. But let's push further on the cultural element. I've seen brilliant technologies fail because fraud teams felt threatened. How do you handle the human side of transformation?
Critical question. Successful banks don't implement at their teams, they implement with them. Investigators, the people who actually do the investigations, become trainers, teaching the system their expertise. We measure success through life science. Is it learning new patterns daily, or false positives dropping? Is it catching novel fraud, etc.? One global bank CISO told me previous solutions felt like organ transplants, constant rejection risk. The living system, felt like evolution. They were natural, gradual, and powerful.
Well, this biological metaphor keeps recurring in what you're saying. It suggests you're not building technology, but designing an ecosystem. And speaking of ecosystems, open banking. Open banking has shattered the illusion of control. We're seeing transaction flows through neobanks, fintechs, big tech wallets, channels banks neither own nor fully have visibility into. Traditional perimeter defense is, well, clearly dead. So how does a living anti-fraud OS protect what it can't see?
Robin, this is where our architecture shines. Traditional systems need control. Living systems need intelligence. Our earth element, the four elements that we talked about, the earth element creates behavioral fingerprints that travel with customers. Your patterns becomes your password, portable across any channel. Water, the second element, learns transaction flows regardless of origin, whether through your banking app or embedded in an e-commerce platform. It recognizes your unique pattern.
So what you're actually doing is shifting from infrastructure-based security to identity-based security. But here's what I'm seeing in the markets. Fraudsters are getting sophisticated at behavior mimicry. They're using AI to study and replicate customer patterns. So how does your system handle an attacker who's learned to walk and talk like the real customer?
Brilliant observation, Robin. This is exactly why our, the third element, the fire element, comes in. The fire element, the threat intelligence, is crucial. When multiple banks share anonymized threat patterns, we spot behavioral mimicry across institutions. A perfectly cloned behavior at Bank A that also appears at Bank B and C. That's not a customer, that's a campaign. The network effect becomes our superpower. More banks in the network means more pattern recognition. Our innovative bank is even monetizing this, offering trust as a service to fintech partners.
Well, that's a paradigm shift from fraud prevention as cost center to trust as revenue stream. In fact, it reminds me about the way cloud providers turned infrastructure from CapEx to OpEx and then to profit center. So let's address what I'm going to call the automation paradox. The better AI gets at handling routine fraud, the more sophisticated the remaining fraud becomes. You need even more skilled humans to handle edge cases, yet the industry narrative is all about AI replacing investigators. So what's your take on this?
You have hit on something profound. A living system doesn't replace investigators, it transforms them into fraud hunters. Today's investigators spend, let's say, 80% of the time on data gathering. Our systems does that in seconds or milliseconds. But here is what emerges. Freed from grunt work, investigators discover patterns humans are uniquely equipped to spot. The social engineering tells the something is feeling off moments, the cultural context which typical AI might miss.
Okay, so it's augmentation, not automation. But there's another angle here: institutional knowledge. Banks spend millions training investigators, and that IP walks out the door with retirements. How does your living system address that effective brain drain?
This is where it gets beautiful. Every investigation, every hunch that proves right, every pattern spotted, it all becomes permanent institutional memory. Veterans becomes teachers, their wisdom immortalized in the system. One senior investigator told me, for 20 years, I felt like I was bathing in water. Now I'm steering the ship. The living system handles the known. I hunt the unknown. That's a transformation from reactive processors to proactive hunters.
Okay, let's start rounding up. This comes from my conversations with C-suite bankers globally. There's transformation fatigue, digital transformation, cloud transformation, now AI transformation. The problem is constrained budgets and competing priorities. Why should a living anti-fraud OS jump to the front of the queue?
Because this isn't yet another transformation, it's survival. Three factors make this existentially urgent. First, the AI asymmetry. Okay, this is very important. Fraudsters using AI against rule-based defenses is like bringing automatic weapons to a sword fight. The capability gap widens daily. Second, trust is becoming the primary differentiator. In a world of instant payments and invisible banking, customers won't tolerate friction or fraud. Only a living system can deliver both security and seamlessness. Third, the competitive moats being built today will be unsurmountable tomorrow. Banks implementing living systems are accumulating pattern libraries, behavioral databases, and threat intelligence that compound daily.
Okay, you're describing network effects meet compound interest. Early movers don't just get advantage, they get an exponentially growing advantage. It's winner-take-all dynamics in fraud prevention.
Precisely. Within 3 years, operating without a living anti-fraud OS would be like running a bank without cyber security. Not just risky, but negligent. The strategic reframe for boards is this isn't a fraud prevention expense. It's a trust infrastructure investment. In digital banking, trust is your product. A living anti-fraud operating system isn't protecting your bank. It is your bank's immune system.
Well, you're painting a compelling picture of evolution or extinction. The choice should be pretty clear: build living defense or become a fossil. Thank you, Rivi, for this insight into the future of banking security.
Thank you, Robin. The future belongs to banks that stop fighting fraud and start cultivating living defense. The transformation has already begun.